Hello, everyone. The desert has a memory. Every grain of sand remembers the footsteps of kings. Every whisper of wind carries the name of those who dared to defy time. And among all names that ever echoed across the Nile, one has never faded: Cleopatra. She was not born in a palace of gold, but in a world already collapsing. The once mighty Egypt was drowning in debt to Rome, its temples silent, its gods forgotten, its pharaoh, her father, Ptah-Luhmi XII Orli-Tes, a weak ruler clinging to a crown that no longer shone. Yet in the shadows of that dying empire, a little girl opened her eyes to destiny. They said she was different from the start. While her siblings played with jewels, Cleopatra played with words. She listened to priests recite hymns, watched merchants argue over trade, and learned the art of silence, the weapon of rulers. Unlike the queens before her, she spoke not only the language of Egypt, but also of Greece, Syria, Nubia, even the Latin of Rome. 9 tongues flowed from her lips, each one a key to a different world. Power, she once told her tutor, belongs not to those who shout the loudest, but to those who know what silence means. Her beauty, history would later claim, was legendary, but those who met her swore it was her presence, not her face, that made men tremble. Her eyes did not seduce, they commanded. Her smile was not softness, it was strategy. She was born of Greek blood, yet worshipped as Egyptian. In her veins flowed both logic and mysticism, both Athena and Isis, reason and divinity. By 16, Cleopatra could recite the laws of trade, debate philosophy with scholars, and disarm soldiers twice her size with nothing but a look. The people began to whisper, "Perhaps the gods have not abandoned us after all." But the palace was no place for faith, only for war. Her father, Ptah-Luhmi XII, ruled by paying Rome for peace. Each year, more gold left Egypt's coffers. Each year, more hatred grew among the nobles. When he was exiled, the palace turned into a battlefield of blood and betrayal. Cleopatra, still a teenager, saw what no daughter should ever see: family tearing itself apart for a throne that devoured all. When her father returned, he did so not as a king, but as a servant of Rome. And Cleopatra learned her first lesson of power. A crown that depends on others is not a crown, it's a chain. At 18, she became co-ruler with her younger brother, a boy manipulated by courtiers and priests. The law said they would marry, as was tradition. The truth was far crueler. Rome watched them both, waiting for weakness. When the famine came, Cleopatra rode out herself, not in jewels but in plain linen, to speak with farmers, to eat their bread, to listen to their anger. For the first time in generations, the people saw a pharaoh who spoke their tongue, and the Nile began to whisper her name. She listens, she remembers, she is ours. But power never forgives ambition. The priests turned against her, the generals swore loyalty to her brother. In a single night, Cleopatra was exiled, driven into the desert, her name erased from the walls of Alexandria. They thought she would die there, but Egypt has always favored those who endure. Under the starlit sands, she made a vow to the gods: "If I cannot return as a queen, I will return as a storm." For months, she wandered the borders of Syria, gathering allies, gold, and knowledge. She learned how Rome worked, its greed, its politics, its hunger for control. She realized the truth. Egypt could not fight Rome by the sword, only by the mind. It was the year 48 BC. The great city of Alexandria was drowning in chaos. The marble palaces that once shimmered under the desert sun were now shadowed by civil war. Two siblings, Cleopatra and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, fought for the throne left by their father. And in the middle of that war, destiny sent her a Roman. Not just any Roman, but the man who commanded legions, conquered nations, and dreamed of reshaping the world. Julius Caesar. When his ship anchored on the shores of Egypt, Cleopatra knew this was her moment. Her enemies surrounded her. Her power was fading. But her mind, sharp as the blade of a dagger, was already weaving a plan. That night, as the city slept under the soft breath of the Nile, a servant carried into Caesar's palace a large carpet, rolled tightly as if to hide a secret. Inside that carpet was a queen. When the guards unrolled it, the scent of lotus and myrrh filled the room, and from within the folds of silk, a young woman appeared, barefoot, radiant, her eyes burning with both fear and fire. For the first time, Caesar faced a beauty not of Rome, but of a civilization older, deeper, and more mysterious. Cleopatra bowed slightly, her voice calm yet commanding. "I am Egypt," she said, "and Egypt kneels before you." From that moment, the conqueror became the conquered. Caesar stood frozen. For a man who had conquered half the world, he had never seen a sight quite like this. The young queen before him wasn't just beautiful, she was alive, burning with an intelligence that cut sharper than any Roman sword. Cleopatra read his silence like a book. Every twitch, every glance, she studied him. And in that moment, she knew this was her chance. "Egypt needs peace," she said softly. "But peace comes only when the powerful choose mercy." Caesar smiled, just barely. He admired courage, and this girl had it in abundance. That night, their conversation stretched into dawn. They spoke of Rome and Alexandria, of politics and poetry, of gods, destiny, and the fragile beauty of power. And when the first light touched the Nile, the conqueror and the queen had formed an alliance, sealed not just by ambition, but by something more dangerous: desire. In the days that followed, the palace corridors whispered with scandal. The Romans called her the Serpent of the Nile. The Egyptians called her the living goddess. But to Caesar, she was something else, a mirror of his own hunger for eternity. Together they ruled Egypt. Together they dreamed of a world united, Rome and the Nile, logic and mystery, steel and silk. When Caesar left for Rome, Cleopatra followed, carrying in her arms a child, Caesarion, the son of the sun, the living proof that even the mightiest man in Rome could be human. But in Rome, not everyone was ready to bow to the queen of another world. Whispers turned to hatred. Senators watched with envy as Caesar raised Cleopatra beside him, her gold crown shining brighter than their steel helmets. And behind their smiles, daggers were already drawn. The world mourned the fall of Caesar, but in the shadows of the Nile, Cleopatra did not weep. She had learned one truth. In the game of empires, tears were useless. Years passed. Rome was now divided, ruled by three men: Octavian, Lepidus, and Mark Antony. And of them, it was Antony who looked toward the east, toward Egypt, where beauty and wealth still glimmered under the desert sun. Antony was not like Caesar. He was wild, impulsive, and passionate, a man ruled not by reason, but by desire. And Cleopatra, she knew exactly how to tame that fire. The meeting was set in Tarsus, a city drenched in the scent of jasmine and gold. Cleopatra arrived not as a guest, but as a goddess. Her ship sailed up the river like a dream from another world. Its sails of purple silk, oars of silver, and servants fanning her with peacock feathers. Antony watched from the shore, speechless. He had faced legions, storms, and kings, but never a woman like this. When she stepped off the ship, the air itself seemed to bend around her. Her dress shimmered like molten gold, and her perfume lingered like a spell. "You summoned me, my lord," she said with a smile, "and here I am, not as a queen, but as a woman who answers only to the gods." That night, Tarsus burned brighter than any city in the world. Music echoed, wine flowed like rivers, and the Roman general and the Egyptian queen began a dance that would set empires aflame. In Antony, Cleopatra found what Caesar never gave her: passion, reckless and consuming. He worshipped her, adored her, and she in turn fed his dreams of glory. They became the sun and moon of the East, ruling together from Alexandria, their love a spectacle that blinded even the gods. But far away in Rome, Octavian watched with quiet fury. He called her the witch who enslaved a Roman. And to the Senate, he whispered, "Antony has abandoned Rome. He kneels before a woman." The sun of Egypt blazed high above the sea, but for Antony and Cleopatra the light was already fading. Their love had turned into legend, and legends in Rome were dangerous things. Octavian, the cold and cunning heir of Caesar, declared war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. He called her the enemy of Rome, and with those words he poisoned the hearts of the people. Antony raised his banners in defense of love. Cleopatra armed her ships in defense of pride. Together they faced the storm, but even the Nile cannot stand against the tide of Rome. The final battle came at Actium, where the blue waters turned red with blood. Cleopatra's golden ships gleamed under the sun, her sails purple like the robes of a goddess. At first victory seemed near, but then confusion, betrayal, chaos. Her fleet faltered, and Cleopatra, fearing capture, turned her ship and fled. Seeing her retreat, Antony's heart broke. He left the fight and followed her, love conquering duty, passion devouring reason. Behind them, the empire they had built began to crumble. Back in Alexandria, the once golden palace now echoed with silence. Antony, defeated and ashamed, wandered its halls like a ghost of his former glory. Cleopatra watched him from afar, the man who had fought gods for her, now crushed by men who worshipped none. "Rome will never forgive us," she whispered. "Then let Rome burn," he replied. But the fire had already gone out in his eyes. When Octavian's army finally reached the gates of Alexandria, the lovers were trapped. Rumors came that Cleopatra had been captured. Antony, believing it true, drew his sword. "No Roman shall take me alive," he said. "I have lived as a soldier. I will die as one." He fell upon his blade, his blood staining the marble floors once polished by her footsteps. But Cleopatra was not dead. When she found him dying, she held him in her arms, and for the first time in years, the queen wept. "Do not mourn me," Antony whispered. "Meet me where the sun never sets." And then he was gone. The palace was silent. The golden walls that once echoed with laughter and music now stood as tombstones of memory. Cleopatra sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the horizon, when the Nile met the dying sun. Antony was gone. Rome was at her gates. And the world she had built, the empire of silk, sand, and dreams, was collapsing into dust. Octavian sent word. "The Queen of Egypt shall live, as a trophy in the streets of Rome. A trophy. That single word stabbed deeper than any Roman blade. Cleopatra smiled bitterly. She, who had made emperors kneel, would never be paraded in chains. Not while she still had breath. That night she ordered her servants to bring her finest robes, the ones of gold and lapis, the colors of the gods. Her hair was braided with pearls, and her crown gleamed like the first light of dawn. In her hand she held a small basket. Inside, hidden beneath figs and flowers, was the last symbol of Egypt's power, a serpent, the asp of the Nile. The air was heavy with silence. Even the guards outside dared not speak. Cleopatra looked into the mirror. She saw not a defeated queen, but a woman who had lived as fire and would die as flame. "I will not bow," she whispered. "I will rise, higher than Rome, higher than their gods." She lifted the asp. It coiled gently around her arm, its scales glittering under the dying sun. A small bite, a whisper of pain, and then stillness. When Octavian entered her chamber, he found her lying upon a golden couch, dressed as Isis herself, serene, unbroken, divine. The serpent lay coiled beside her, its duty fulfilled. "So ends the Queen of Egypt," a Roman general murmured. "No," Octavian said softly. "So begins her legend." And thus Cleopatra, last Pharaoh of Egypt, lover of emperors, died as she had lived, on her own terms. And that was the full story. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories and Documents, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any future episodes like this one. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.